Welcome back, everybody. I'm waiting for to go. Welcome back, everybody. I'm happy to be back on Wednesday. I took last week off. It's episode 59 today of the Brick Wall. Don't have a brick wall behind me, but some pretty flowers, and I'm joined in person. We were both tested and both negative. Both negative with my dear friend and brother-in-law Ryan Marcus, who's an associate broker at Avenue SIR, Sotheby's International Realty. So Ryan, thanks for joining me live, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So take us through a little bit of your career history. Go back as far as you want. How you got here?
Sure. It's actually been an interesting trip. So after college, I went directly to law school. After the law school, I spent about 3 years or so practicing as an attorney doing real estate transactional work. Then about a year and a half after that, spent about a year and a half doing hospitality law, working for a hospitality group. And then shortly after that, I decided I wanted to make some sort of a change, a pivot, and in doing so, I kind of looked back at my time doing real estate as an attorney, and I always thought to myself that the brokers were the people at the table having the most fun. It was always, they had the bigger deals, the bigger numbers, things were just more exciting. And I said if I ever had the opportunity, I wanted to go and find a way to get myself onto that side of the table.
So how much did $1 Million Listing affect your decision to get into it?
Truthfully, not much, but it always kind of kept that real estate being a sexy way to make money or a sexy career path.
So I mean, again, you're in the legal field, you're in the real estate world now. Which one's much more cutthroat?
It's different. I mean, they're both in their own way. They're both kind of client facing or customer facing, and it's all about customer service at the end of the day. But it's different deals, different dynamics. It's hard to kind of compare them apples to apples.
All right, cool. So, again, you had legal career working in real estate, hospitality, doing a lot of transactions and real estate deals for those entities and companies that you work for. You transition into you become a broker. How does that process happen? And tell us the backstory of like when was that aha moment and how did that come about?
You mean, how did I transition from law into being a broker?
Correct.
So like I was saying before, it was always something I thought about doing, something I wanted to do, and the skills, especially having a history as a real estate attorney, the skills kind of parlayed themselves very nicely. It wasn't too much of a stretch to take my ability to negotiate on behalf of a company or a corporation and take them to negotiate on behalf of a client for a real estate deal. Same thing with the customer-facing aspects and the customer service and the responsiveness and the keeping the open lines of communication, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I remember again because we're brother-in-laws. When you first went out and did this, you've always been a hustler, working multiple jobs, doing this, doing that, keeping yourself busy, organized while doing that. I want to hear. I mean, I remember the story that you told me. To get with Avenue SIR, walking down the street, Court Street in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn. Tell us about that journey and how you got into it.
So it was actually a pretty funny or interesting story. So at this point, I was thinking about leaving the hospitality group that I've been working with, and I still wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going with a full-time legal career or transition into real estate as a broker full-time. So I decided, why not split the baby, do a little bit of legal work, and do a little bit of legal work as well, or brokering work rather. So what I did was I walked down, whoever's familiar with Brooklyn Heights, I walked down Montague Street where there are a bunch of well-known brokerages. I walked down Court Street with a bunch of other well-known brokerages, and I pretty much banged on every door that I can find and said, hey, I'm an attorney, I'm looking to do real estate work on the side or just part-time, would you be interested? And almost everyone either didn't respond, would give me the runaround, or give me a number that that either didn't pick up or never got back to me when I left the voicemail. It wasn't the question of, as an attorney, could he do this, could he not do this? It was the part-time aspect. People weren't sure if someone doing this part-time could ever, fully get their head around it, whatever it may be. And then, serendipitously, I was walking down Court Street one night. I hadn't given up on this necessarily, but I wasn't sure which way it would go. I'd received a bunch of rejections or a bunch of just non-answers. So then one night I was walking down Court Street and I walked past a brokerage that I previously knocked on the door, but they either weren't open or there was no one there to talk to me. And I said, let me just pop my head in one more time and see if we can make this work or if anything's possible. It was a small brokerage. I mean, well known in the neighborhood, but not, you know, not a national brand at the time. And I walked in and I said, hey, is there someone I can speak to about possibly joining you guys part time? I'm an attorney. I have the background. I'm a licensed broker, so on and so forth. And just by almost sheer luck, I walked in, and the person or the person working the front desk brought me in to the back. Said, "Oh, the head broker is actually in a meeting right now. Maybe we could let you sit in." And it was actually a meeting or the early stages of talks where Sotheby's was actually coming in, or Avenue Sotheby's rather, was coming in to acquire or to add this brokerage to their brand. And I was actually lucky enough to sit in on the initial meetings of these brands coming together, and kind of weigh in and just sit through that. And through that, we guys started talking to the former head broker of the previous firm, and now the head broker. And in doing so, we just thought this would be a great fit. Everyone was on board, and I started working with them pretty much right after.
How much did you, being an attorney with real estate transaction experience, weigh in on their decision, and like them being gung ho and excited about you, especially during a time of transition for them?
I mean, it was definitely a big factor as to why. I was already licensed as an attorney, so I was able to do the work and kind of be up to speed quickly because I knew the industry and I knew the ins and outs of these transactions. Also, I was able to kind of keep up with them, talk the language, and it was a perfect marriage kind of from day one.
That's awesome. I mean, so now that you've been doing this for a little bit, and I know you're partnered with my sister, and I'll plug you guys. What's it like to to work with your wife and selling real estate?
So it's really interesting. It's very fun because when I wanted to do
And no, she's not sitting right there. Don't worry. No, she's not.
When-
Be careful, buddy.
I do. When we said we wanted to do this, when I started looking at this part time, it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to do this as a career. I thought this would be like the best possible thing for me. I just enjoyed doing it. We both love this field. We love seeing new properties. We love working with clients, helping them make these decisions and working on these transactions. So for us to do it together is almost a blessing because it's just one extra or one additional thing that we kind of love, and a hobby that we can share together, or even a career that we can share together.
Absolutely. And you, I mean, again, as an attorney, you face challenges going through law school, then you face challenges with the bar, then you face challenges getting a job, especially in the market that, after 2009, after the economic, the recession back then, and, other things that are going on. What are your biggest challenges, now that you're in the real estate game?
I mean, it's at the end of the day, it does become a job. There are certain requirements. There's paperwork. There's client-facing issues. Every career has its challenges, especially now with COVID. As I'm sure you can imagine, things have really taken a turn.
Absolutely. So, on the COVID note, I mean, I've seen, I've read a lot of articles. I've seen, a lot of, what different brokerages have done as far as showings, online showings. Obviously, moving more towards video, and I've even seen as far as like robots with an iPad, that tour around the space, or a 360 video. Like how is Sotheby's, how have they pivoted, and what do they have in place that was adaptable to this new environment that we're living in?
So Sotheby's, being the brand that it is, it's always been at the forefront of innovation, technology, and integrating these into the day-to-day life of a broker. They were already working on a lot of the tools that were necessary to make real estate in the time of COVID actually viable and doable and workable.
Mm-hmm.
And they were at the forefront of having virtual showings and having really high quality videos and really well staged pictures, and the 3D Matterports, which are those like dollhouse showings where you can kind of go in, do a 360, walk around as if you were there, which really makes a huge difference for clients that may be a little apprehensive even now to go and see a property in person.
And what's been the buy-in on the client side? Because I know, everyone knows. I mean, when you're purchasing real estate, unless you're buying an RV or a boat, but that's probably the second or third purchase behind your primary residence. You're making a huge purchase. You want to touch and feel. You want to see that the railing is not broken. You want to make sure that the flooring is right. And again, pictures can be sometimes deceiving.
Yeah.
So what's the buy-in been like on the client side, as far as like waiting till much later stages to see the piece of real estate that they're going to purchase?
So I've always been very upfront with my clients. I've never advised them or told them you should go and buy a property based on a picture or a video that you've seen. Even in the heart of the pandemic, when things were moving really slow, and I don't think I was the only broker saying this, because the numbers were kind of reflected that showings were way down, and even when they were slowly coming back online, people were a little apprehensive, and reasonably so, at least in New York. Yeah, I mean, it's just it was a slow build in that sense, I guess.
Absolutely. So I mean, so what's changed as far as again, getting back to that point and digging deeper into like clients, it's not only the biggest purchase, but it's also like you need rapport and trust.
Yeah.
So like, how have you adapted, as a broker to build that rapport and trust, whether it's through Zoom or Hangouts or Meet, Microsoft, Meeting, whatever, all of those different platforms, or FaceTime. Like, what have you done, and how can you fast track that relationship with the client to have trust with them?
So I always find that you kind of have to meet the client the way that they want to be approached, or meet the client how they make themselves accessible. So I don't push for a Zoom call. I don't necessarily push for phone calls, emails. I respond to the client the way that they want to be approached. Not all clients are comfortable having a one-on-one FaceTime, or some clients always want to have one-on-one contact in person, whether it be in a park or socially distanced, grabbing a cup of coffee, something like that. So I always try to meet them the way they want to be approached.
That's that's a good tactic, and that applies across the board. I was just thinking, even there are some clients that are wealthier individuals, like foreign investors, who have no problem buying something sight unseen. Some of them have their reps that go see it and they're on the ground. Have you dealt with or talked to anyone within Sotheby's who have had from start to finish had someone buy a property without even seeing it?
So I don't have any direct experience with that. I think we were actually talking about this a little earlier, that I find that people's clients, and this isn't just in real estate, it's really in every facet of someone's life, is that their clients or the people that they surround themselves with tend to reflect who they are or who they're even aspiring to be to some degree. And as a result, I deal with a lot of either first-time home buyers or people who are early stage transitioning or having kids and kind of grow that way. So I haven't had any direct contact with international buyers at this point in my career or doing anything like that. So I tend to focus more on the earlier stage buyers.
So what's your advice? I mean, again, there are people who are buying a second home, buying a third home, or they're moving to to a bigger house. What's your advice in this environment, to first-time home buyers?
So it's going to depend on what your strategy or what your goals are. If you're a first-time home buyer and you're looking for long-term, a place to be long-term and raise a family and put your kids through school there and have your career focused around that, then this is a good time, and I think that this is a good time to buy, especially with money being so cheap at that, with mortgage rates so low.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's all about what the goals are. There's no one size fits all. If they're looking for something as a home for a long term, this is a good time to jump in because you're going to gain value over time. And the numbers, while they're extremely important, you never want to overpay for something. When it's an actual home that you plan on living in for the next 10, 20, 30 years, the numbers become, again, important, but this is a home that you're dealing with, and it becomes a much more personal decision than a financial one. But the flip side is if you're looking for something short term, if you think this is a good time to make your first purchase and you don't want to be there for more than 5 years or so, then you have to look at it as more of an investment. You have to look at it through that lens, not just the personal home lens.
So I mean, you just mentioned first-time home buyers looking at it as for the 10 to 20 year, like their forever home possibly. How do you balance and help your clients not fall in love with the property? Because you've always told me and other brokers tell me don't get emotional about it.
Yeah.
Certainly I can understand that with a second home or with an investment property, because if the finances work, great, and if they don't, great. But if my wife or your wife walks into a property and it has the perfect pool and the perfect railings and marble countertops and all the right appliances and the bathrooms are gorgeous and everything's perfect, how do you not fall in love with that first home, especially as someone who's maybe a little bit more naive, for lack of a better term, as far as being a smart buyer?
So part of my job and any broker's job is to, again, take as much emotion as possible out of the equation. You don't necessarily want to take all of it out of it if it's going to be a home, but my job is to keep them on track, look at the numbers, look at the comps, see, and just make sure you're not overpaying. But again, if it's going to be a home that you want to be in for 20, 30 years, it would be naive to take emotion out of the equation. So again, you bring emotion into play. They could, if they look at a room and they can see their daughter's crib there, or they can see, reading a bedtime story to their son in that room, it's hard to take that out of the equation. It would be crazy to even try to. But it's all within reason and keep it measured. You have to look at the numbers to a degree and make sure that you never want to overpay for anything, even if it's emotion. But again, it's all about context.
Don't some brokers lean in, like the example you just gave of someone like envisioning the crib in a room and it's going to be perfect and the room is already pink for my beautiful baby girl and everything's going to be gorgeous. Like, don't some brokers use that to their advantage to complete the sale and push it? Like,
Yeah, so up until this point, we've been talking a lot about buyers, not necessarily sellers. So brokers tend to wear two hats. If they're representing a buyer, they're going to take emotion out of the equation and they're going to do as much as they can to make sure that their client is represented to the best of their ability. When you're dealing with something on the sell side, it's almost your job to kind of weave that narrative and help the person envision themselves in this place and starting a life here. So again, it's all about which hat you're wearing at any given time.
so speaking, I mean, you brought it up, sellers, with everything that's going on in New York and in New York City, and I want to talk about that more. I've been very, open about, the reason I took the week off is because I was driving back from New Orleans. My family and I are moving back to our house in New Jersey. But I've been reading the news and talking to people and talking to you, about real estate in the city. How do you convince on the sale side, on the seller side? How do you convince folks that maybe it's not, the time to get, 20-30% premium on your purchase and what you paid for it, or in some cases maybe it's time to take a loss and a little bit of a haircut because you want to get if you're trying to get out of the city and get rid of your property. So I know you have issues on the buy side, but like on the sell side, how do you deal with that and manage those, those situations as well?
So kind of similar to what we were saying before, everything that you do with a client, whether it be a buyer or a seller, it's all about where they are in life today, where they're going to be in a couple of years, and what their long and short-term goals are going to be. So if a client is able to hold on to a home and isn't forced to make that sale or take that loss, I would advise them to hold off. And granted, it may sometimes be against my interest as a broker, because if I don't have a listing or I don't make a sale, I don't get paid. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your client. And I find that by giving them that advice and telling them the truth, this might not be the best time for you to list it, they tend to respect it, and you have a much longer and more valuable relationship in the long run.
I mean, are most people like on this, like the sellers, are they generally emotionally tied to their property because it was their home, or they, understand, and work off the comps, or is it more like, this is my home, I love it, and I raised Susie and Katie and Jimmy here, and all this. Yeah. I mean, what?
I mean, it's understandable. Sellers tend to be very attached to a property they've lived in, especially under two circumstances. One is if they've lived in a property for 30 years with their partner and something happened or they were forced to move. It's a very tough decision, so they get very tied to it, and they kind of blur the value of that property based on what their emotional connection to that property is. And as a broker, your job is to, again, steer them back to reality and say, listen, here are the numbers, here's what's actually happening. And the other situation is they haven't been there for that long, but they put a lot of money into it up front. And they put, the best sound systems into the ceilings, and they have the best installation and top appliances, and they renovated it, soup to nuts, made it the best possible apartment or property that it could possibly be. It's hard to convince them that the changes that they made to something don't make it the world's most valuable property, especially when they put in things that are very specific to their tastes.
Yeah, I've seen some homes that are customized with 70s decor even today, or like every cabinet's a different color. It's like, yeah, that might be cool, and it might have been very expensive, and it might be Italian marble, but that's customized and personalized to
nobody
your
told
taste.
you to put in that Italian marble, and you can't expect the seller, unless you find that or rather the buyer, unless you find that perfect buyer that loves that, to pay the premium that you paid because you valued it more than someone else might have.
Absolutely. But again, I'm sure your sellers have a hard time understanding and swallowing that, because to them
it's all about, I guess, delivery. And again, this is where the legal background comes in. It's telling people who you kind of rely on for your business things they may not want to hear, but are ultimately in their interest in the long run.
Yeah, I think that definitely brings brings with that an advantage to being a broker, because I feel like again, a lot of people, there's some that are notorious in the industry for being a little bit slimier, and they're just selling and pushing, and being more like spinsters, like my industry. So I think the honesty and brutal honesty at that is exceptionally is very important for.
Well, just not to cut in, but just to that point, my experiences with most brokers. I mean, granted, there's always the outlier, but my experiences with other brokers, for the most part, have always been professional, and it happens, but it's not it's the exception, not the rule, where you see these people making less than above board or ideal transactions.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, and I apologize for my my misconception and for spewing that. On that note, I mean, I know you and Marielle are very active. It's, what is it, Marielle and Ryan Sell New York?
Mariel and Ryan sell NY.
Sell NY. So, I mean, you guys are active on social, always posting and posting your listings. But you also, speaking of, other brokers and, playing nicely, you guys always, in any transaction that you do, you post and tag the other broker and, in thanking them for working together, nicely. Tell me about that, because I think that's a great strategy.
I mean, I guess kind of playing off what we were just talking about before. It's whenever you do a deal with somebody, I always want it to be the first deal that I do with them and not the last. And for the most part, everybody has that same mentality. We're all kind of playing in the sandbox together, and we're all in it together. So just by being professional, enjoying what you do, and enjoying who you're doing deals with, you just end up in a better place.
Absolutely. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but definitely want to share. I've definitely stated that I'm bearish on on New York City, and it's sad. I was in Midtown the other day, and we're giving up our office in Midtown, and we're going to find another office in a couple of months. But I just couldn't on end pay an exorbitant amount of money to have an office in Midtown that no one was going to. That's on the commercial real estate side. And you hear about there was an article in the Post this morning by the Post editorial team, and there have been articles in other outlets. The moving company said that they are like up 95% year over year as far as people leaving the city. So what's your position on? Well, we'll just start with that. What's your position on on New York City and New York City real estate moving forward?
I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic, relatively bullish. I tend to defer to people who are much smarter than myself. And at this point, a lot of it is speculation. A lot of people who are, again, much smarter than myself are on both sides of the fence. I tend to think that things will ultimately turn around. It's New York. It all comes down to, I guess, to a degree, work from home and where things are going. But just look at Facebook. I mean, they just signed a massive several 100,000 square foot lease. That to me says something. That this isn't going away overnight. Work from home is not going to take off. It's not going to shoot through the roof. And again, when Corona starts to abate, schools will reopen in full force, and people will come back. If the jobs are here and the people are here, the rest of the culture comes with it, and New York is right back to where it was in the beginning.
So, I mean, but have you had clients that have reached out to you and have inquired about moving outside of the city?
Mm-hmm. Again, a handful, but I've had just as many, if not more, clients my age looking to kind of get a deal or try to find out. Like, listen, I'm not going anywhere. My job is in New York. My family's here. My life is here. I am, in a position now where money is relatively cheap for a mortgage, or mortgages are easy to get if you're in a certain position or a certain class of, your credit scores, whatever it may be. And they're looking to take advantage. They say, I'm not going anywhere. My life isn't moving. I'm not going to the suburbs. This is the time where I can make a purchase that may have been otherwise 5 to 10 years down the line. And I'm seeing just as many of those types of people calling me as people looking to get out.
And those that are looking to get out, where are they looking?
I mean, the places you tend to read. I mean, they're looking in parts of Jersey, Connecticut, just anywhere outside of the city that's still close enough. Although, funny enough, people are asking me how Brooklyn's doing. I mean, I do most of my business in Brooklyn. That's where I'm based out of. And for the most part, the Brooklyn real estate market hasn't really changed all that much. There's been, some deviation. The rental market's a little bit softer than it's been in the past. But for the most part, product and quality product is still moving.
And I mean, when people are looking for deals, are they looking for more fixer-uppers or turnkey, or I mean, like where do you get the better deal?
It depends, especially in a time as turbulent as this one, where so much is unknown. It really depends on finding the seller and getting an idea of what their story is. If it's someone who, at the first sign of the virus, said, "Forget this, I'm going to Florida," then they don't really want to carry an apartment in New York and keep paying the monthly fees and the taxes. They just want to be done with it. And again, some of them are extremely wealthy and they'll sit on this for years until it's a better time to sell. But sometimes people just up and leave and don't want to deal with it. And if that's the case, you may be able to get in there and find yourself a nice deal.
I mean, you mentioned Florida. I've talked about moving there, but I've also talked about the coronavirus shuffle, which we talked about the outer borough. The outer boroughs, and then people moving to the burbs. Out east in Long Island, Westchester, Connecticut, New Jersey. Have you been getting inquiries on about people moving to Miami? Or
Actually,
South Florida?
We had a conversation about that, and I was able to put you in touch with someone, again, through Sotheby's. When you work with a brand that has not a national, a global presence, I'm able to kind of put you in touch with anybody and any place, really.
Yeah, but so are folks looking for like with the people that are looking in Brooklyn right now, are they looking for the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom apartment? I mean, again, obviously it's dependent on the person, their price range, etc. But I've thought that like people are looking for more space. If maybe a townhouse that's a fixer upper in a transitioning or transitioned neighborhood. Maybe with some backyard space or at least a couple floors so you could spread out. Certainly a home office. I mean, what are the typical units or properties that people are looking for that right now?
So again, just by virtue of the types of people I tend to deal with more than others, it's people looking for that second or third bedroom because this is a place, if they're buying it now, that they're trying to get long-term value out of, and they're looking to be in and grow a family in. So I tend to see people looking for more, I guess, fixer-uppers in the 2-3 bedroom range, or even just turnkey in the 2-3 bedroom range at a price that they can probably get it a little bit lower.
And so and like advice to buyers, and then I want advice to sellers as far as in negotiating. Give us a couple of pointers on either side.
Sure. I mean, if when you're representing a buyer now, if they're a qualified buyer, it's really it's a great time. I mean, it couldn't get much better. Money is pretty cheap. You're finding, rather mortgages are pretty cheap, and you're finding that some sellers they just want to go. So this may be a good time if you're thinking about buying something to talk to a broker and see, what are my options? What's out there in the range that I'm looking for? What's out there? What are my options essentially? And then on the sell side, I guess the advice I would give is be patient. This is an interesting market, a lot's unknown, and you may have some people coming out of the woodworks looking for, a Corona discount, so to speak, or something that would get them the upper hand. And if you're in a position where you can possibly wait, I would urge you maybe to wait a little bit.
And so again, since you deal predominantly in Brooklyn, what are the neighborhoods that you're seeing, trending in the sales direction right now?
So it's the same areas that were kind of trending before the pandemic, and it's just kind of exacerbated now. It's areas like Prospect Lefferts Garden, parts of Bed-Stuy, Stuyvesant Heights, areas where you're able to find space and value more so than other areas, places that are kind of up and coming with train access. Because again, people are assuming the jobs, at least in our demographic, are assuming the jobs are coming back, and people will be commuting again. So places that are spacious, affordable, and accessible, and easy to get into the city.
Well, you said subway, and I get that, and that's normally what people are looking for. And again, I lived in Cobble Hill, and I was on Hicks and Kane, which was far from the subway, and it was
I remember that apartment.
it was a great apartment, but it was definitely a great exercise because it was a 4th floor walk up, but it was at least a 10 or 15 minute walk from any public transportation. Are people looking more for public transportation now, or for that home office because they anticipate at least for the next 6 months?
So it kind of depends on who the client is and what they do for a living. So I have clients that even before the pandemic generally worked from home, or they're writers or they're artists, and that they just want the extra space to work. But I also have friends in finance or in other institutions that, Armageddon can come tomorrow, and they'd open their office the first day they possibly could.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that it's just temporary they're working from home. It's not going to be a long-term situation. They're looking to get something very nice right near a train with more space.
Yeah, and it's not easy to get parking or a garage in Brooklyn.
I mean, some parts parking is easier than others, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of the trade-off that you have in certain parts of living in the city.
So tell us about, again, you deal with a lot of different neighborhoods, a lot of different people, a lot of different listings. What are your personal favorite neighborhoods in Brooklyn?
I mean, I'm always going to be partial to, Brooklyn Heights, Cobble Hill, just because that's where I've been, and I've lived there with my wife for the past, 7, 8 years, something like that. I went to law school there, and I just kind of never wanted to leave because I just like it so much. But again, I mean, the older I get, the more I start to value, more space and a better value. And again, I think it's great to be closer to the parks. So again, Prospect Lefferts is, it's great. Park Slope is great. Again, my wife, your sister is pregnant, so I'm starting to think a little bit differently in terms of what it is that I'm looking for. So I kind of see it now through a different lens, but still, I mean, I'm always going to be somewhat partial to downtown Brooklyn, Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens.
And how about in Manhattan? Where do you think are the growing neighborhoods?
I mean, the city is always the city, and it's the kind of thing, almost like, the northern part of Brooklyn, where every few blocks is a new neighborhood, so it's kind of hard to pin one down. But again, families tend to move further north, younger people tend to move further downtown, and that's, I don't think it's ever going to really change.
Yeah, a lot of deals in FIDI.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't believe I used to go there as, young, being a kid or teenager going to South Street Seaport, and it was dead except for tourists, and now there's a burgeoning community of young folks living in those big, high
That's
rises.
actually one of the examples I tend to give people when they say, "Oh, how real estate in the city, it's over. It's done with." I look at FIDI after 9/11, and everyone said it would never come back again. This is it. We're done, and it built back better and stronger than it ever been before. And I don't see this necessarily being that much of a difference.
I mean, not to play devil's, well, to play devil's
go for it.
advocate, and not to, I don't want to get political, and I don't want to talk about, the city, leadership, but 9/11 seemed like an isolated incident down there, and I agree that it came back, but it definitely seems like there are multiple fires throughout the city, so, for lack of a better term, putting pressure on the administration and the leadership, that, could be hurting it. But I definitely agree overall, again, even though I'm more bearish than you, that, New York is New York. People,
Yeah.
the minute I mean, we're also, forgetting that tourism is shut down right now.
Yep.
Once that comes back, you have an influx of, tax revenue. You have an influx of, hundreds of millions of I think it's 100 million tourists a year. I completely don't know those numbers, but I know it's definitely a lot. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
But like you said, New York is New York, and I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. And even if work from home took off to a degree, New York will always be New York.
That's I mean, I'm happy that you guys are slanging the real estate, man. So where can you and Mariel be found?
On Instagram, you could find us on Mariel. I think it's Mariel and Ryan Sell NY. You could also find us on the Sotheby's website, and anyone could
What is it? Avenue SIR?
It's avenuesir.com.
Avenue Sotheby's International Realty.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you, joining me. I'm always happy. Thank you for everyone who's watching. As I was going to mention earlier before we went live, I took last week off to drive my family up to back to New York, and settling back down here, and Ryan was kind enough to join me as for the 59th episode, coming right back. So I appreciate it, and I'm happy that we both got negative so that we can do this in person and have a drink
Yes.
and have some beautiful flowers behind us. Again, thank you for joining me, and if you have any real estate needs in the city,
Yep.
it's the guy, and that's the gal, even though you can't see her. But
Right over there.
yeah, thank you.
Always feel free to text, call my number. I mean, I think most of people on our networks have it, but it's 718-902-2863. Always feel free to call, text, even if you have no intention of entering to anything. Questions, concerns, always happy to help.
And thank you again for everyone for coming back and watching after the hiatus. We have two guests next week. We're trying to slow it down a little bit for August because I know everyone's either hanging out with their family, staycations, vacations, taking some time off and slowing down a little bit. So we're going to slow down a little bit as well, and maybe spread the content out. But again, thank you for everyone for watching The Brick Wall and episode 60 next week. Look forward to having you guys back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.